Jesus Christ reveals through Gottfried Mayerhofer. Secrets of Life. Chapter 18, August 9th, 1872. The various forms and kinds of animals. Thus says the Lord. Some of you, as well as many others, have racked their brains as to why there are so many different kinds of animals, whose usefulness you, being human, understand, and whose outer form, moreover, is not in the least in accord with aesthetic principles, and in your view, ugly. Whereas I, the Creator, could be expected to create everything as being worthy of me. That means endowed with the most beautiful forms. This is how you judge, how many people and natural scientists judge, who everywhere expect to find things according to their imagination, but not as I wanted them to be, in accordance with my wisdom. Well, as your saying goes, every bird sings according to the shape of its beak, and as one must forgive these learned gentlemen and many other over-subtle reasoner and fault-finder, if in his blindness he talks of things which he does not and never will understand. So, as to still give you proof that I am forbearing, as I have always been towards my immature children, and forgive them also these ridiculous and clumsy views, I nevertheless want, at least among the small number of my adherents, a better opinion to prevail. And so I will yet again, as on another occasion, let you look behind the veil of Isis, proving to my adherents and worshippers that not all that presents itself in the world to your eyes as clumsily made is actually so, and that the old God certainly knew long ago what he was doing, long before the idea existed as to whether a human heart should beat or not. So let us come to a point. You see so many animals, the reason for whose existence you cannot grasp, while you have to assume, because I created them, that there must be a reason why. Look, if you really understand your arithmetic as I practice it, and had not merely a vague little idea of the deeper meaning of your mathematics, you would find it easier to grasp many a thing. It is true, mathematics or arithmetic teaches you to conclude from the known to the unknown quantity. It teaches you to always think logically, always conclude from one to the other. However, this thinking and concluding again and again implies the difference between a finite created human being and God. He, while observing the same manner of concluding as the one you have discovered in mathematics, calculates, concludes and thinks also in a totally different manner from you weak and immature children of a mighty Lord and God. From this it follows that, when you apply your standard of thinking and concluding to my words, there always appear gaps where human thinking is insufficient, because a divine thought lies in between. You know, for instance, a great number of insects whose usefulness you fail to understand, while daily feeling the tormentors unless you protect yourselves against them with all the means at your disposal. You know a great number of other animals that only live to consume other animals below them, and therefore only live for the sake of preying. You know a great many other animals which only become familiar to your eyes through the microscope, and which have been endowed with a productive energy, a longevity compared to which that of higher animals, and even of man, is left far behind. Thus you see in the animal kingdom many contradictions for which you have no explanations. But if you thoroughly observe one of these animals individually, it turns out to have been created with such a wonderful form, and is sustained with such great care, so that its species cannot be lost. This of necessity leads to the conclusion that, considering such an animal's form, its life, and its immense power of reproduction, there must be a great reason for the Creator, or me, to endow such a tiny animal with attributes, which I myself have refused you intelligent human beings, my children. So, you are being plagued by doubts, not knowing what to think of the created or the Creator. Look, in order to elucidate this anomaly a little more closely for you, I must lead you onto a field completely different from the material one. For we must begin with the spiritual, for which matter serves only as an envelopment. Only with spiritual eyes can then be seen what will forever remain hidden to the physical eye and also to the eye of the intellect. The idea of God as a spiritual being implies as a matter of course that his creations must be spiritual products. However, if God wants to create a world or a visible expression of his divinity, he too must establish a certain gamut as to the created, which gamut corresponds to regular thinking and must exist as a basis for the existence and permanence of the created world. Only then is there a life, a striving and moving upward from the lowest to the highest possible, which finds its proper purpose expressed in the words or concept, coming into being, existing and perfecting. Therefore, everything created has as its foundation a more or less spiritual principle. In everything existing, something of my divinity is hidden. As this divinity can and must be spread onto further levels, it was also allotted an analogous body, an analogous inner arrangement, and an analogous duration of life. There are no leaps in nature, but always transitions from one animal to the other. These transitions then necessitated many creations, which, being links, made these preparations possible for the transition from one level to the next. And these intermediate species, understood in the spiritual sense, are the very same animals that often trouble you so much because you do not know why they are actually there. When you draw your conclusions, you completely forget that for a progress in a spiritual sense, in accordance with the thinking of a creator of a universe, other levels of logic totally different from yours are necessary. However, with many of these animals, there was still another reason for their form and their life. Namely, not only to serve as intermediate and transitional beings, but also to exert a mutual effect for the stimulation of the spiritual progress of the beings far superior to them. Look, the bugs, lice and fleas, and all the other insects tormenting you in particular, are for your spiritual stimulators to look after your body and your dwelling in such a way that the former may be worthy of the intelligent spirit, and the latter, by the observance of the principle of cleanliness, also further your health, so that you do not, like pigs, go down in the filth and dirt, instead of rising upwards. These animals, and still other tormentors of man, have by far a higher purpose of life than you think. In them is realized the mediating level between a low and a somewhat higher intelligence, clothed in a body, something you cannot grasp. In strength and endurance far surpassing you, they could well demonstrate to you, if you could view the spiritual levels with spiritual eyes, how much it takes to render a lowly divine spark receptive to even a millionth part of higher intelligence. For thousands upon thousands of the lowest animals, an upward development is impossible, and they can begin their ascent only by serving as food for higher animals, and then combining by the thousands into a single higher animal. The smallest infusorian and monads, as you call them, as well as the worms of the corals and other crustaceans, are only there to help build up your Earth's crust with their bodies, thereby rendering it solid, and also to produce a considerable quantity of minerals and stones from the waters of the oceans, which they use to solidify their own bodies, and which are then turned into solid mountains or rock, chalk. Since often millions of such animalcules can live in a single drop of water, you must realize that there the productive capacity must be extraordinary to build within the time ordained by me an earth crust, including its mountains, which carries everything on it with ease, and is capable of resisting the expanding force of the vaporized elements within its interior. Look, your soldier must pay for his clothing, his keep, even for all he requires, with the pay allotted him. There is, in your country, not a highway whose travelers did not have to pay for, the road and its maintenance through a self-imposed toll. Indeed, the whole complex of your empire lives and exists only inasmuch as all its inhabitants have to pay for the needs of the whole state with its officials and kings, making the state, which as such has no money, only the steward of the money entrusted to it. As you proceed in the state, I do in the worlds, for every world must develop, maintain and perfect itself, so that it has prepared within itself for the future transition the forms then required under the changed conditions. The smallest animals, barely visible to your naked eye, build the crust of your earth, support the life of millions of other animals, and help to beautify and solidify the surface of the earth. The somewhat higher animals, in which my divine spark, as an almost developed sense, can already assimilate other things, have to be the carriers and sustainers of again higher animals, and so forth in stages up to man, where there are great productive forces. Consumers of these forces are at hand, which curb this reproduction so that it remains within the lawful limit. Thus exists the harmony of the whole, from the spirit imprisoned in solid rock up to the free man. A quiet bond of assimilation winds through, whereby one can exist through the other. One can perfect itself through the other, and can thus, through man, again return to the spirit realm from where it once came. Years would not suffice to explain to you the cause and the why, beginning with the smallest infusorian up to the elephant, to dearly demonstrate to you even one class of the lowest mollusk and the reason why I have formed them thus. Why these little intelligence particles of the vegetative life are in this form, in this element, be it water, earth or air, and why such transformations are necessary, so that such an obviously neglected animal be formed thus and not otherwise in order to fulfill its purpose. Therefore, you must first recognize these arrangements and their why, before raising the question why the whole animal is there, for what purpose, and on what part of the gamut. Where is your science which could explain this? Just look at a small nerve center in a living body. What is it? Is it the director? Is it the propagator of organic and animal life? Is it alive, or does it merely propagate life? All these questions must first be discussed if you want to understand the whole animal. Where are the books that would suffice to give you the thread through this labyrinth of whys? Here, man, as a finite being, has reached the limits of his knowledge, the limits of his intellectual capacity. Here begins God, the Creator, who can only say to man, "Immature child, what do you want with your limited grasp of that which God, an infinite being, has created? A nerve fiber is and remains for you an eternal riddle. How can you criticize and judge a created being consisting of millions of parts, which, under different forms, still express only one thing, namely, the present level of a spirit particle, a minute particle of the great Creator? A Creator who deemed all these arrangements necessary, lest such a tiny spark should forever be deprived of the capacity for progress? Where is your wisdom, and where is mine? I permitted you only one thing, and that is, by watching with spiritually open eyes throughout my creation, to learn to surmise and love the great Creator as your spiritual father. However, To understand him is beyond the limits of even the whole spirit realm. For I alone am completely infinite, was never created, and you, however close to me, are nevertheless, as created beings, forever finite and imperfect. This, my children, do understand. Grasp it, and you will then be able to easily grasp that, just as with the slow progress of the spirit particles in individual beings and species, also the outer form of these animals must be adapted to the requirements of the spirit, as well as of the body belonging to it. Just as in you human beings, the face and the whole form partly express the spiritual interior, and man can be partly recognized from his features, which give expression to either a noble or a common human soul. Also, the form of even the lowest animals, up to those close to man, namely the ape, is the expression of its inherent spark. This is why, with still undeveloped senses and faculties, the forms cannot correspond to the aesthetic concept of a highest human spirit form. For this spirit, in its immaturity, has still other requirements, needs other arrangements to fulfill its purpose. There, the spirit itself, in its spiritual form, is still an embryo on the lowest developmental level, and therefore, simple as it is, also the envelopment surrounding it can only be simple. The only factor determining the form of the animals is the region in which they must live, multiply and reproduce. This requires in one case 1,000, and in another no feet at all. In one a single eye, in others many. But everywhere the outer form is the physical expression of the level occupied by the enclosed spirit spark. This is the reason why you often find animals which, judging condescendingly, you declare ugly. However, if you could spiritually see the species and levels, beginning at the bottom, through which such a spirit must pass before he can come to a greater self-awareness, you would consider the form given to it in its isolation the most suitable, which can correspond to its spiritual and material requirements, only thus and not otherwise. You have deduced all your concepts as to aesthetic form from the human form, having taken the human form as basis, as basic type, because also I formed you once in my image. But the forms of the animals cannot be judged according to the human form, simply because, in the animals, the inner spiritual form is not perfected, not quite clearly expressed, and still in need of many additions, until it can approach the human form spiritually and physically. And even where it comes closest to man, as in the case with the ape, the animal is lacking in the soul, but highest attribute that makes man human. It is the freeing from the leading string of nature, instinct, and, as the keystone of creation, the higher spiritual gift of the free will, emancipated from the instinct, as a free being to be also free from all the shackles and bonds of a nature subordinate to him, a lord over himself, and a spiritual lord of creation. The form of a spider, a beetle or some other insect, of a bird or some quadruped, is also given according to the aesthetic principles known only to me, and gives us a foreknowledge of various primordial beginnings of beauty, as well as its culmination in the human form. It is, however, still largely hidden under the influence exerted on it by factors such as location, nutrition, and purpose of existence. There, the hidden spiritual form is wanting in beauty, and so also in its envelopment must be wanting in beauty. But you may be assured of this, a chain of ideas goes through the entire organic world, which slowly prepares one form out of another, introducing one into the other. It is always adding, always perfecting, until in the human form the keystone of all striving has been reached, beginning with the hard rock up to man. The latter has developed the logical or mathematical idea of a highest being, of God, who in man wanted to create his spiritual and physical image, to whom every other animal would look up in reverence, surmising, if not recognizing in him, not only its Lord, but also its friend and highest goal. However, do not consider man as he is now, but think of man as I created him, when, pure and unsullied, he went forth from my hand, an image of me, and an ultimate product of spiritual ability and the most beautiful material form. Thus, the human form was once the true expression of his spirit out of me. Thus he must again become. Once he has ennobled himself thus, also the animal world surrounding him will participate in this ennoblement. It will not lag behind, so that man, though more ennobled, will stay in the same relationship to the animal world surrounding him as when he was once created. Once upon a time, man understood the animal world better than now. The latter obeyed man more and was not his enemy. However, man distanced himself from his primal form. He became different, whereas the animal world remained the same. Therefore, since man has become known to most animals only through his hostile intentions, the animal world regards the present man with more awe and fear as its enemy. The gentle relationship existing between both from the beginning is ruined, the place of the friend having been taken by the inexorable selfish ruler. Now, man is often compelled to protect his own life against the attacks of animals that in the earliest times lay tranquilly at his feet, only obeying his orders. Thus, man has misused his freedom and turned the peaceful world into a den of murderers and thieves, where, of course, only fear and hate, but no longer any love or trust can prevail. To you few who still believe in me, in my teaching, I am sending these lines for you to see new proof of my endeavor, without touching your freedom given you by me, to again make you such human beings as the one once going forth from my hand, and in line with him, this earth shall again become a paradise, a garden of Eden for its inhabitants. To you these lines, so that you may read from them the infinite love and goodness I have for you, and no soul or spirit particle which I once had sent forth into the vast spaces of my creation may be lost, but be duly respected. Furthermore, whenever possible, adding to their perfection, so that all the simple or complex infusorians, monads, animals and human beings, once in the future on the long road of perfection, purified and matured, may again enter the spirit realm from where I once sent them out, to pass their trial life on all the levels of my spiritual and material realm, and united with the highest and most intelligent spirit of the worlds and earths, be able to form in man a whole, pleasing me. What is the summary of the aforesaid? That love alone is the deciding factor, which, although at first it separates the spirits, only serves one purpose, namely, to see them finally all the more intimately, because perfected, united. However, in order to value this unification, as befits spirits, offspring of mine, the same must be fought for, deserved, for only accomplishment deserves the crown. The awareness of accomplishment results in the blissfulness of possession. Therefore, you too should strive to attain what I have shown you, so that you, as my images, may be worthy and deserving of the name my children. All these lights of grace which I send you from time to time serve to achieve this, namely, that you shall more and more realize that in the smallest monad, as well as in your fellow man, the same God keeps preaching you the same thing, which nature during every walk and every pulse beat as a time unit calls out to you. Do not ever forget to what end you were created. Use every minute and every word from me to fulfill this purpose. For soon the time will come when the grain and the chaff will be separated. Happy they who have used time and word in such a way that they, raised as corn for a fertile, invigorating bread for the heavens, can confidently continue on the road of perfection, when I shall come, as the sole shepherd, to gather my sheep under my protection, which will certainly happen soon. Amen.